Hello, Internet, and welcome to the Homebrew Studio. My name is Matthew. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm going to be with you here in the studio for the next hour or so today as we talk about creating homebrew content that you can use in your role playing games with your friends at home. So, thank you for joining me today. With me, as always, is Logan, one of our Nerdsmith directors and the arbiter of the live stream. Logan, would you say hello to the nice people in chat? Speaking of, let's see who we've got in chat today. Oh, I see Zach is there. Hello, Zach. Nice to see you as always. Just a quick note before we get into our studio proper today. I want to say thank you to everyone who has been participating in our 2019 Nerdsmith subscription drive over the last couple weeks. It means so much to us that you value what we do enough to chuck a few bucks our way, and I want to say thank you to all of our renewing and upgrading and all of our new subscribers as well. Thank you so much. You guys are helping us continue to do what we love, which is bring you this great free nerdy entertainment. So, getting into the studio today, what I want to talk about is a really nifty product. Not product. We're not selling anything. A nifty topic that's not only going to help you, the Game Master, to build out and expand the lore of your world, but also introduce quests, new plot hooks, give your players something unique and interesting to take away from the game, and that topic is crafting and crafting materials. Now, crafting for some people is really great and meaty, a great meaty mechanic for you to dig into, and it gives them a goal to work towards. I'm one of those people who really gets into crafting in RPGs, so this is something that speaks to me. Other people, maybe not so much. They might find it tedious. They just want to walk into a shop and buy from a list of items. They don't want to have to, worry about gathering materials to quest that enchanted, to construct that enchanted crystal axe that's going to do double damage against grass-type Pokemon. They just want to walk into a store and buy something off the shelf, and that's fine. The great thing about tabletop RPGs versus video games or any other type of gaming experience is you can customize these systems in whatever way you want that's going to make the gaming experience more fun for you and the players at the table. So talk to your players. Always, that's the best advice for any type of homebrew you want to introduce. Get their opinions, see what they think, try to sell them on it if it's something you're really into. Just remember everyone has their own definition of fun, and where those definitions overlap is where you're going to get your best game material. So when it comes to introducing crafting systems into your game, as I mentioned before, it opens up a load of potential benefits for you, the game master, dungeon master, storyteller, what have you. First, it gives the players something to do, and that's always a big positive for me. You're introducing an additional route for your players to interact with the game beyond the standard roll a d20 and add your modifier. It gives them something to do during downtime, and if you know me, you know that I am a huge proponent of giving your PCs downtime between adventures. They can use that time to craft things, to pursue professions, and just live semi-normal lives and develop as characters. I think it's fantastic. Second, a crafting system gives you the basis to build quests and adventures around. Say the party rescues a blacksmith from marauders, and in gratitude he offers to build them powerful arms and armor, better than what they have currently, but first they have to go and venture into the lost mine of Fing Fang Foom and recover the precious adamantine ore that was left there when the mine was overrun by Charizards. Yes, I have Pokemon on the brain. I'm excited for Detective Pikachu. Third, introducing these unique crafting materials helps you build out the world that the game takes place in, and this is one of the best aspects in my opinion, because I'm all about world building and lore. A perfect example of this is Airshale from the World of Vale, which is the world our Countless Heroes game takes place in. Now, in the lore of Vale, Airshale is a magically reactive stone, and it's said to be the eggshell from which the mother dragon laid an egg and the world was hatched and born from, and that airshell is the remnant of that egg in that particular creation myth. So we can tie these unique materials into the story of our world, and in similar ways, giving depth and richness to our world lore. Maybe these materials come from the bones of great titans that once roamed the earth but were slain by the current pantheon of gods when they came to power. Or maybe in some point in your world's history there was a gateway to the abyss that opened up and demons came marching through and everything they touched has this kind of demonic taint to it. And your warlock really, really wants a staff that's carved out of that demonic tree. But again, you're tying it back into the lore and you're helping your players feel like their characters are part of the world instead of just interacting with it on a surface level. So there are a few ways we can go about introducing crafting and crafting materials into our role-playing games, and these methods are by no means necessarily exclusive. Excuse me, you can use different methods for different materials or different situations. Yes, Zach, fear the great Fing Fang Foom mine. So, if we look at different properties and different ways we can introduce homebrew crafting materials, I've got 3 examples of ways we can do this. The first is talking about materials as being inherently magical. So a particular type of material has an inherent, unique magical quality to it. As an example, if you are taking the scales from a red dragon and building armor out of it, well, that armor has fire resistance because the dragon is a fire creature. There is a different way of looking at it where you're talking about magic susceptibility. Maybe you have a world where mundane materials like iron and steel can't be enchanted. They don't accept magical properties. You have to quest and find rare, specific, unique materials that can be enchanted and actually hold the magic within them. And then the last means, which I call magic amplifying, or the Morrowind crafting method, if you've ever played Elder Scrolls III Morrowind, is that increasingly rare and valuable materials amplify the power of magical enchantment. So, example, a silver ring can be enchanted to cast a 2nd level spell, but a platinum ring that's been encrusted with emeralds can cast a 5th level spell. Because it's more valuable, more rare, it can hold more powerful magical enchantments. So those are 3 options we have for building magic systems into our world. If we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons, it's usually the inherently magical sort of situation where certain types of materials have inherent magical properties, and that's fine. That's a great way of doing it. But you can use the 3 of these in combination with one another. It doesn't have to be just either or. So I have a chart here that I've already made up if we were going to use the magic amplification route, the Morrowind system. And I have a chart here which we could use if we were going to say, okay, just mundane sort of materials. If we wanted to say we have a player character who wants to enchant their sword to deal extra ice damage or something. We can look at our chart here and say, okay, well, if it's a mundane material like wood or iron or steel, you can enchant it, but that maximum enchantment power it can hold is only a d4 of extra damage. If we move up from there and we move to something more rare, something more magically based, then that increases to a d6. Moving up from there to 2d6, and up from there to 3d8 when we're talking about really high tier, hard to find later game materials. And what that allows us to do is not only build in this idea that not every material in the world has the same degree of magic reactivity, but also we build in this scaling damage modifier. As they increase in levels, as they're getting more powerful, as they're facing more powerful enemies, they can also acquire items that can be enchanted to do more damage. So we're scaling the damage up as they get more levels and more powerful. Excuse me. Just got something in my throat today. There we go. So, you'll notice on this list some things that don't exist in D&D, and I've just sort of made up, just in my own head, as, wow, this is not going away. Apologies for everyone listening. But just some materials I've made up in my own head that could be inserted into a list like this. Moving on to something like an inherently magical system, and this is where I'm going to start soliciting ideas and suggestions from all you folks joining me in the chat today. Moving on to an inherently magical system, let's talk about different types of materials we can create and introduce to the game that will have interesting and unique properties to them. So I'm talking about something like, straight out of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, adamantine. Adamantine is this exceptionally hard material that if you have a suit of armor made out of adamantine, any critical hit against you just becomes a normal hit. It negates the critical damage. So, that's an inherent property to adamantine. There's also mithril, which in Dungeons & Dragons, because it's so lightweight, heavier mithril armor doesn't impose disadvantage on stealth checks. It's not as noisy and clanky. I've added something there, which I think is an addition that makes sense in my mind, at least, if you were going to take mithril and use it not for armor, but if we want to maybe forge weapons out of it, then I think that lightweight property comes into play, where if you have a weapon that normally would have the heavy property and you forge it out of mithril, then it's not considered heavy, up to a weight of about 10 pounds. But that opens up for things like, mithril battle axes or mithril long swords, which normally couldn't be wielded by smaller creatures who wouldn't have the strength for it. But if you're making it out of mithril, it's more lightweight. That for me makes sense. So I've got some examples here of other magical crafting materials that I have just dreamed up and just put into a list. I'm going to ask for your help in coming up with magical properties that these materials could have. So I've got 9 or 10 on this list. And the first one is Heartwood, which Heartwood is, in my imagination, gifted by ancient trees in sacred groves, and it's widely used by young druids to fashion their weapons and shields. Because druids, they love nature. They're not going to go cutting down trees. This is something that the trees gift to them to make their armor and weapons out of. So what sort of magical property do we think would be inherent to Heartwood? It could be maybe a bonus to healing. If you're wearing Heartwood armor, this natural magic that is suffused through the wood, and the nature of it being a gift is meant to be protective. Let's see, what else could it be? Maybe Heartwood weapons do additional poison damage. That's a possibility. But it has to be, it's something very nature-focused and nature-based. I'll let you guys think about that for a minute. Also on this list, I've got Ember Wood. So this is going to be something that is sourced from the ever-burning trees of Flameheart Forest. And Ember Wood is imbued with the elemental magic of the Plane of Fire. So it's still wood. It's still something that we can imagine a druid using, because druids don't use metal. It's just part of their flavor. They don't use metal. They use wood and hide and that sort of stuff. Natural. I guess metal is natural, but materials that don't require mining. So this could be something that, let's see, what do we got here, Zach? Something that's resistant to bludgeoning damage, but susceptible to slashing. Ooh, that's interesting. If we're taking the idea that this is sort of the elemental essence of wood, that bludgeoning damage isn't going to do much against it, but chopping, slashing damage is going to damage it. Interesting. I like that. I'm going to put that down as an idea. That's very good. Thank you, Zach. And then we have Ember Wood. So this is infused with elemental magic of the fire plane. It comes from an ever-burning forest where these trees are just constantly lit aflame, but never seem to burn down. So maybe if you have a shield made of ember wood, it gives you, protection against fire. Um, that would make a lot of sense. Maybe blacksmiths really love ember wood because they can use wooden tools in their forges, and the wood doesn't burn. It doesn't get damaged by the heat. So maybe this is a resource that's quite prized by certain blacksmiths. Um, Looks like we got some more people joining us in the studio. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Feel free to hop into chat with your suggestions and your ideas. We're talking about materials and crafting today for your tabletop RPGs. Let's talk about Arcanite. And Arcanite, in my imagination, this is a special type of metal that's created by infusing electrum with raw arcane magic. This is something you're usually going to find in possession of an accomplished wizard or at a wizarding school where they teach this sort of magical practice. We can imagine what kind of traits would Arcanite naturally have? Probably something related to arcane magic. Maybe it's particularly resistant to arcane magic, or maybe it's very vulnerable to magic. Maybe it makes a good conductor for magical enchantment, but you wouldn't want a suit of armor made out of it because any mage would just blast you with powerful magic and it would amplify it rather than reduce the power of it. Let's see. What is something that's sort of fundamentally arcane? Let's see. I'm just thinking through the sort of spell schools, the different damage types. And I think really, if we're talking about arcane magic in Dungeons and Dragons, I really associate that with force damage more than anything else. I know that there's like some cleric spells and whatnot that do force damage, but that's really something that you think like magic missile. The prototypical wizard spell, it's force damage. It's just this power of arcane energy. So maybe our weapons forged from Arcanite deal additional force damage. Zach with an interesting idea. What if we're talking about some kind of magical focus for an arcane user to use, like a rod of spell casting forged out of Arcanite? That's another idea where it would be, more powerful. We can think about an Arcanite spell focus as being something like maybe like there's an item in the DMG called the Rod of the War Mage, I think, or something like that, where basically all of your spells get more powerful. It could be something like that if we want to use Arcanite in that capacity to tie it into have basically the same item, but have it be made out of this special material that we can then tie into the world lore a bit more. That's a good idea, Zach. It's a favored material for crafting arcane foci. Okay. I haven't seen any suggestions for Ember Wood, so I'm just going to go back up here and use the one I kind of came up with, because I like that. Shield made from Ember Wood provides protection against fire. So let's move on now to the Astral Crystal. This is an idea I came up with because I like sort of multiverse isn't exactly the right word, but that kind of interplanar sense that you get with more cosmic scale Dungeons and Dragons, where you're not necessarily confined to just this one plane of existence. You can go anywhere. You can get into like Spelljammer stuff or Planescape, and things start getting really weird and unusual and cool. So, astral crystals. I'm thinking of this as something that's harvested from frozen asteroid belts that just float out in the astral sea. And they can be hewn to serve many different purposes. I'm thinking of like, the Githyanki and the Githzerai who float through the astral sea on their great spaceships. I'm just imagining this crystal, this spaceship that is itself just a giant crystal that's kind of been hollowed out and turned into a spaceship. And it's made from this astral crystal, which is it's part of the astral sea. It's something that's been taken and repurposed for this reason. Mulder, hello. Wands made of it could store arcane magic. You could use to steal arcane magic from others for use as your own. Interesting. The Arcanite, that is. I like that. In fact, here's the note I'm going to make, because I think that's really clever. And I see this being something that specifically, if we're talking about, maybe we're talking about like wizard dueling, and we've got magic users that are fighting against one another, and so you want to use Arcanite. Arcanite's really good against magical users. So we'd have an item. So if we want to introduce this Arcanite into our game, here's the kind of item that an example item that we could maybe make out of it. An Arcanite Spell Stealer. And we'll say it has to be tuned to a spellcaster. And I think you'll see why when I describe what the property is here. When... Ooh. So what I'm thinking here is, this is the kind of weapon you use against, if you're a wizard, you might use against another wizard, where if you hit somebody with it, there's a chance that you steal some of their magical energy. And in the game, that would be interpreted as basically like you're stealing a spell slot from them, right? If you hit them, there's a chance that they lose a spell slot, and that magical energy gets converted and transformed over to you, and you gain a spell slot. I'm just thinking of how to write that in game. When you roll a 20 with an attack against a creature with at least one spell slot, that creature loses... Because I don't know if I want it to be their highest level spell slot. That's a real dick move. If somebody's got that 9th level spell slot and you hit them with an Arcanite dagger and that 9th level spell slot is gone. That's also really powerful, and I don't want to dick over the players. Could be that you steal a spell slot equal to your highest possible spell level? Zach has another suggestion here. If Ember Wood is from an ever-burning forest, maybe that's not only used for weapon and armor, but also provides aid against cold climates. Smart. Clever man. It'd have to be a level in which they both could cast. You could say that when a spell misses against you while attuned, you can roll a d20 to absorb that spell slot. Interesting. Minimum of 1. Frosty 10001. Would there be a difference between arcane spellcasters and divine spellcasters in regards to Arcanite? Good question. Would it work with divine magic or not? That depends. I like it being more open, and personally, this is, just for my flavor, and your mileage may vary. I like the idea of arcane spellcasting being a bit more, not predatory, maybe that's not the right word, but a bit more cutthroat, and a bit more, just a little more insidious than divine spellcasting. Whereas divine spellcasting, I always feel is like something that is granted to you. You are granted this power. Arcane spellcasting feels like something you have to take. And so I'm not against the idea of you using this kind of a weapon against a divine spellcaster and saying, oh, that power that your god gave you? Haha, it's mine now. So, yeah. Just based on what Duskfey Druidic. For some reason, I never noticed the IC until just now. The idea he had. So if we're going to use this as an armor, you say it has to be attuned to a spellcaster, obviously. When a spell attack of first level or higher misses you, you regain a spell slot equal to the level of the spell up to the highest level you can cast. If you have no unspent spell slots, this property has no effect. So basically we're talking about a mage who's wearing this armor that basically provides almost like a magical battery. For every time somebody tries to hit them with a spell, the spell doesn't hit in game terms, the armor absorbs it, and the mage gets power back to cast more spells. That's a very powerful magical item, and I might put some restrictions on that before implementing it into my game, but I like the idea. Hello, Timeric Peleus. I hope I'm pronouncing that yet correctly. Yes, we are building homebrew content for your role-playing game at home. If you see anything you like and would like to use, welcome to the studio. We're happy to have you. So we were just talking about homebrew crafting materials and the different types of inherent properties that they might have. Currently, we're talking about Arcanite, which is created by infusing metal with raw arcane magic, and what kind of properties something like that would have. So we've just come up with an idea for an Arcanite armor that allows you to steal basically the magical energy of spells. And then there's also a weaponized version of that I'm still trying to figure out exactly how it would work. I'm thinking maybe with the armor having this property to absorb spells, the spell stealer doesn't actually do that. Instead, it's going to be a spell eater. So it doesn't give you spell slots, but it will take spell slots away from somebody it hits. So when you roll a d20 with an attack against a creature that has at least one spell slot, that creature loses, should be their highest level spell slot? That's very powerful. Maybe it should be a d10 roll? Maybe untreated Arcanite is magically explosive. Ooh. That's an interesting idea, Temeric. That this material being, exposed to raw arcane energy, it's quite unstable. And it has a chance of just going poof. You think about something like the Staff of the Magi, for example, which is, if you don't know, it's sort of a legendary Dungeons and Dragons items. It's extremely powerful wizard staff, but if it gets broken, it just explodes in this massive magical, explosion. And you don't want to be standing next to it when that happens, though it does give your wizard the opportunity to sort of suicide bomb themselves. Wild magic effects, also a possibility, depending on how good of an enchanter you are. You don't really know what you're doing. Who knows what could happen? So we'll just leave it at that for now. I'll have to go back and figure out exactly how to balance that, because don't want to be too powerful, but, we'll see. It's a good idea. I'm going to go back up to Ember Wood, which is another one of these magical crafting materials we've come up with, because I believe it was Zach? Someone had a very good suggestion about what Ember Wood could be used for. Yeah, if Ember Wood is from an ever-burning forest, maybe it's used not only for weapon and armor effects, but also provides aid against cold climates. So we'll say maybe we can fashion, like, so maybe we have like magic bracelets or magic rings or something made of Ember Wood that protect people from cold climates. We could also say, because if it's ever burning wood, I can imagine there being like, maybe an Arctic sort of climate town where people like having this stuff because they can put it in their fireplaces and set it on fire, and it burns and burns and burns, and it never actually consumes the wood. It just constantly continues to produce flame. Again, it's another quest opportunity idea that we can build into our game, give our adventurers something to do. You have to, must go out to the Flameheart Forest and gather ember wood, otherwise we will freeze to death for the coming winter. Got some more comments here. Omolder, you could use a chart to determine the spell slot, different range of rolls. It's a very good idea if you want to leave it to random chance. Frosty. You have a 10,000 option wild magic chart? Yikes. Hello, find your anchor point. Welcome to the studio tonight. Glad you could join us. We are discussing crafting materials and how we can introduce them to our games, the kind of flavor and utility that they can bring to us. And we've gone through a few already, but we'd love to hear your suggestions if you have any ideas. Astral Crystal, I touched on briefly. This is something that's harvested from asteroids floating through the astral sea. It can be hewn to serve many purposes. The next item I have that I've come up with is Sky Steel. And I'm thinking this is mined from meteorites that come plummeting down out of the astral sea into the material plane. And it's exceptionally, I've already kind of done a little bit of it here. The Sky Steel is exceptionally resistant to magic. I kind of like that idea that if you have something that's made out of Sky Steel, good luck enchanting it, but it's good protection against spell casting as well. And then a perennial favorite, Dragon Scale. As dragons age, their scales grow thicker and harder. And if you have possession of dragon scales, it usually means that you are either really brave, because you went out and killed a dragon, really rich, because you went out and paid somebody to go kill a dragon, or you're really lucky and you have a dragon friend who's like, here's some scales that fell off of me, do with them what you will. Temeric Peleus, do you have a list of herbs to compound into herbal tinctures, potions, poultices, etc.? That is another great way of introducing crafting components. I do not have anything like that in my list, but we can certainly add to it if you have any suggestions. Zach, Astral Crystal can be used in crafting to enhance conjuration magic. Ooh, I kind of like that. The idea that it being from the Astral Sea is what's typically referred to as a transitive plane. It sort of links different planes of existence together. And conjuration magic is something that you use to open gateways, to summon creatures from other planes. That's really a very good idea. So we'll say Arcane Crystal can be used to increase the potency of conjuration magic. That's a very good idea. I'm imagining, like, I can't think of a good pop culture reference for this, but I'm imagining like platforms of this astral crystal that have been specially carved and basically serve like teleportation platforms, where you step on it and you get teleported to another platform made of the same crystal, in sort of like a teleportation circle kind of way, but with a more sci-fantasy kind of flair to it. I like that. With enough astral crystal, you can enchant ships to fly. Yes, and that's exactly what I was talking about earlier when I was saying, you have these races that are inhabiting the astral sea that float through on these great spaceships. One of those spaceships are carved out of this kind of astral crystal because it's native to that particular plane and it allows you to traverse it. Find your anchor point. I wonder if you could get around that magic resistance by engraving runes into the sky steel itself, as those can be magical in and of themselves. Interesting idea. And it's something we could certainly explore if Sky Steel is something you want to bring into your game. So, Find your anchor point. Wow, portal rooms. I was kind of thinking like that, but yeah. Yeah, it's an idea. It's the same sort of thing. Frosty, another point to probs consider is that every material possess a mechanical effect. Sometimes I like to think of materials with existing properties like conductivity, malleability, etc., but not... chat, you're going too fast. I love it. But that's just me. Yes, absolutely. You can come up with completely mundane materials that don't have any, like, magical effect, but have specific uses in more mundane ways and have beneficial properties where people are looking for them because they're easy to use if you're a blacksmith, or, you know, they are rare and therefore considered quite expensive. You can absolutely do that as well. These are just some examples that I thought up off the top of my head. Omulder, Astral Crystal should have a travel aspect to it. A ring with it could transport you through a random plane and teleport you to a random safe spot XX feet away. I see what you mean here, where you have a magical ring that allows you to teleport distances in the material world by basically shortcutting through another plane of existence. That's a good idea. Ooh, that's an interesting idea, Frosty. A type of glass that is superconductive to electricity rather than being resistant. That's very interesting. Sort of a fiber optic kind of material. Timerick, I really like what you're saying about herbalism, and it's definitely a great inspiration if we're going to be talking about herbalism and the different kinds of herbs and medicines and remedies that people can create and concoct in your world. And of course, there's always that element of folk medicine, which should be as real and present in your fantasy world as it is in ours. Yes, there's going to be alchemists and apothecaries going around who actually can brew toadstool and troll dung and witch's hair and put it together and make a healing potion. And then there's going to be some peddler on the street who claims to have made a healing potion, but really it's just a concoction of crap and it's not going to do anything for you. And there's going to be rumors and old wives' tales and all that kind of stuff that kind of muddy the waters a little bit. And that's all great, because that builds and fleshes out this idea of it's a living world. There is both information and misinformation, and the way you dole it out to your players is going to kind of determine... You don't want to be too heavy-handed with the misinformation, because then they start not trusting you, and that's... that way chaos lies. But giving them just a little taste of it every now and then, just so they know I can't trust everyone in this world to be exactly honest, which is more like the real world. That's great. That was a bit of a tangent. I apologize. Dragon scales, Find Your Anchor Point says, could have the conductivity of the color dragon it's from. Not sure exactly I understand what you mean by conductivity. I'm guessing you mean like the magical sort of properties, which is pretty much the way that they're kind of used in D&D as it is. Like if you're harvesting green dragon scales, green dragons have poison breath, so you have resistance to poison when you're wearing green dragon scales. And that's absolutely a way you can go with it. But there are maybe other ways we can use dragon scales as well. Find Your Anchor Point. I appreciate you staying up to be with us in the studio, but if you need sleep, go sleep, buddy. I completely understand, and we will have VODs of this for you to check out later. And let's talk about these last three that I've got on my list here, because these are ones I think are pretty neat. And these would be like big, like high-level, in-game sort of materials, because now we're talking about the big sort of powers behind our universe and our game setting, cosmically speaking. The first is Eternium, which angels and their celestial kin bear their gleaming armor and weapons made from Eternium, which is smithed in the golden forges of the heavens. This is the stuff that the direct agents of the gods wear. It's only 5:45 p.m. I'm just perpetually tired. Teacher problems. You have my sympathies, sir, and I'm going to say thank you for being a teacher. I come from a family of teachers. I appreciate exactly how much work goes into being a teacher, and I mean, you are the backbone of society. Thank you so much for doing what you do and putting up with the long hours, the sometimes crappy kids, and usually their worst parents. So, um, but yeah, that is what it is. That's another tangent from me. The opposite sort of Eternium in my imagination here is Infernum. And this is forged in the soul-fueled flames of the hells. This is what the armies of Asmodeus don as they go off on their eternal crusades. Infernal and eternal. So you have these sort of dueling different versions of this kind of cosmic level crafting material. Eternium, which is very heavenly, and Infernium, which is very devilish and hellish. Eternium grants additional radiant damage against undead and fiends. Absolutely makes sense. Similar to Eternium, what about Ambrosia? Ah, Ambrosia is quite nice. It all depends on how we want to use it. In Greek mythology, from what I remember, this may be iffy, I'm sorry, Ambrosia was... It was one of a couple things that if a mortal imbibed ambrosia, they would become like a demigod, basically. Um, I suppose you could cook with ambrosia. You could. Absolutely. It was ambrosia and something else, and now I'm going to be racking my brain trying to figure out what the other thing was in Greek mythology, that if you ate it, you became a god. But yeah, that kind of building off that idea of these are things, these are artifacts from the heavens, and they are most holy and most sacred. And some people are going to want to protect them, and some people are going to want to say, "Ooh, that's powerful. I'll have that, thank you." Uh, and then, of course, you might have agents from the other side saying, "Ooh, that is sacred and holy. It must be destroyed." And again, we're getting into the narrative. We're starting to build quests and ideas around it, which is why crafting materials are so great. Um, and then the last thing I have on my list, which is one of my favorites, Primordium. This is infused with the raw power of the elemental planes. I think of this as like the purest, most raw form of elemental energy forms into this material called Primordium. It can only be found in places so ancient as to predate all of known history and is rumored to be the foundational material from which the material plane itself was formed. So it's the primordial matter. It's the first thing. Before there were things, there was a thing, and that thing was this primordium. It's incredibly old, incredibly rare, and incredibly powerful. Frosty, perhaps Eternium and or Infernum can only be equipped by individuals whose blood are related to their realms. Interesting. So we're thinking like Asamar can use Eternium, and Tieflings can use Infernum, but nary shall the twain meet. Adverse effects for demon-blooded folk taking up arms with Eternium. Yes, that is a possibility. It could also be maybe there are... I'm trying to think. Maybe if you have like Eternium chains or Eternium manacles is the kind of thing that if you encounter a fiend of some nature, you can put these chains on them and it causes them great pain or robs them of some of their power, leaves them helpless before you to touch this holy metal. And the same for using Infernum against an angel or some other type of celestial. Ooh, Zach has an interesting idea. Primordium can't be mixed with basic metals, so no alloys. Only sky steel can be crafted with it to suppress the raw power. That's very, very clever because if we are uh, establishing, that's the word I was looking for, disestablishmentarianism, no. If we are establishing sky steel as being something that is resistant to magical energy, and we have this incredibly powerful magical substance, it would make sense you're going to use the one to sort of handle the other. Maybe you can't even touch Primordium. It's got so much raw magical energy in it, you need like special sky steel gloves or tongs or whatever to even handle the stuff. That's a great idea. And you've got like sky steel hilts for these Primordium weapons. Yeah, that's actually brilliant, Zach. I like that a lot. Ah, well, we've gone through some really, really great ideas today in the studio. I'm just looking at the time and realizing it's almost 6 o'clock, so I need to start wrapping things up. Thank you all so much for joining me today in the Homebrew Studio. Before I go, I will remind you that you can find all of the creations from what we make here on stream on our World Anvil page, which is titled Homebrewia Studiopolis. If Logan hasn't fallen asleep at the keyboard, he'll put a link in chat. You can find everything we make there on stream for you to use in your own home games or to take inspiration from to create your own homebrew material. We are very, very lucky to have World Anvil as a sponsor of the Nerdsmith Network. Please check them out at worldanvil.com. It is the most robust world creation tool on the interwebs, whether you're homebrewing an RPG setting or creating a world for your novel or other creative fictional work. You can get a free World Anvil account. It's absolutely free to sign up. And if you want some extra special features, you can upgrade to a paid subscription as well. To me, it's very much worth it. I also want to thank Die Hard Dice, which is another sponsor of the Nerdsmith Network. As a thank you for joining us in the studio and watching our program, you can save 15% off your first or next order of some beautiful custom metal dice or dice accessories. They have some really great dice trays as well. Just go to dieharddice.com and use the coupon code HOMEBREW. That's one word, HOMEBREW. 15%. It's a one-time use only code, though. So just keep that in mind. And if you want more of me, you can follow me on Twitter at Matthew A. Siebert. You can also check out the Land Above podcast, which is a D&D storytelling podcast in a homebrewed subterranean setting, and I am the DM for that. You can find that by going to nerdsmith.org and looking under the content tab, or by subscribing to the Land Above podcast on your pod player of choice. We will be back in the studio next week at the same time, 5 p.m. Pacific on Wednesday, here on twitch.tv/wearenerdsmith. Until then, let us know what you think of what we've created on the stream today. You can join our Discord. There's a link in chat. There's a link under the Twitch player. It's a public Discord. Join the Homebrew Studio channel and let us know you're enjoying the show. Let us know what you have ideas on, any homebrew ideas you might have inspired by what we've been working on in the studio. And that's really great. We love to interact with you. That's what the show is all about. So coming up next on this channel in about an hour, we have Countless Heroes, which I mentioned earlier, our West Marches style D&D stream, which is DM'd by Logan and features a revolving cast of 16 players. That's at 7 p.m. Pacific, just about an hour from now. Tonight is, from my understanding, the beginning of the end, as it were, for Countless Heroes, as they are plunging into their final arc with a tremendous battle on the horizon. So grab some dinner, come back, see how this epic story comes to a close. But that's it for our time in the Homebrew Studio this week. We will see you guys next time. Guys, gals, and others. Take care, my friends.